So we are now recording this session. Thank you so much for being here. Let's see. Yeah, I would like to welcome everyone for being here today, and thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat box, and you can write them at any time, and we'll have them answered as soon as LaFonda pauses. So LaFonda, we just want to share a little bit about Leadership Long Beach. We bring together leaders from across the city, and we put them through a 10-month program, or our executives do a 6-month program. We also have a youth program, and we all learn a lot about Long Beach. We know that you have spent some time in Long Beach, and so we are excited to have you here to share your leadership journey with us. So I'm going to hand it over to you. If you could just tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did you start? How did you get to where you are? Just walk us through your path.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to be participating. It is my first Fireside chat and video chat, and so bear with me, but I am excited to be a part of this leadership training that you all have implemented. So I'd like to say, first of all, good afternoon. And virtual hands, how many of you feel that we are living in such an interesting, dynamic, and frankly crazy time? 2020 has been crazy. So I'll do my virtual hand. It has been. So a little bit about myself. I'll start with where I am today, and then I'll go through our mission, and then I'll kind of give you my journey. So my name is LaFonda Sutton-Burke. I am the Area Port Director for Los Angeles International Airport. I'm responsible for, at least last year, Los Angeles International Airport was the second largest commercial international passenger operation in the US, second to JFK. We processed about 12 million passengers last year. And we'll talk about today's numbers later on. As the Area Port Director, I oversee U.S. Customs and Border Protection's operational and administrative aspects of port security and trade facilitation, not only here at the Los Angeles International Airport, but also McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, along with 6 user fee facilities, Ontario, Van Nuys, Victorville, John Wayne, Palm Springs, San Bernardino, and also international mail facilities and express consignment courier facility. As you all may or may not know, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is the nation's largest law enforcement organization or agency, and we remain at the forefront of today's biggest challenges and emerging threats. We have about a 60,000 men and women operation, and we make critical decisions that protect the American people by securing the borders and advancing the nation's economic prosperity in the face of, some of the most dynamic and dangerous, unpredictable, evolving circumstances, which is probably why I really love this agency, because no day, not one day, has ever been the same as the previous day. Our mission is to protect the American people and facilitate trade and travel. That's our mission, bottom line. Our core values are vigilance, service to country, and integrity. And prior to LAX and how I've been able to actually be so fond of Long Beach, I really loved the time that I worked at the Los Angeles Long Beach Seaport. Again, largest seaport in the United States, 36% of all maritime cargo arrived through the Los Angeles Long Beach Seaport. And that seaport, we called it like a seaport complex, because it wasn't just Long Beach, it was Long Beach, Los Angeles, and Port Hueneme. Um, we processed cargo last year valued at about $244 billion. And again, the largest seaports, number 1 and 2, LA and Long Beach. So it was one of the most amazing positions that I had had. And so I kind of talk about resilience throughout this discussion today, because CBP, you have to be resilient. But let me talk first about my leadership journey. So my leadership journey actually began when I applied and was accepted to the Oklahoma National Guard Officer Candidate School. I'm from Oklahoma, yes. And so I graduated from the Officer Candidate School as a second lieutenant. And then I went to the U.S. Army Logistics University in Fort Lee, Virginia, and became a logistics officer. And what the Army calls it is a quartermaster officer. And that's usually someone who, is responsible for transportation, everything logistics, movement, beans, bullets is what we used to say. And, that was really my first, that was the beginning journey where I actually started understanding what a leader was about, how to lead people. And then I also realized the enormous and the gravity of the responsibility of being a leader. I served as a platoon leader at a transportation company. And I think what really happened during the experience, I had an opportunity to volunteer for Operation Desert Shield. It wasn't Desert Storm, it was the cleanup to Desert Storm, and it was called Operation Desert Shield. That opportunity led me to Saudi Arabia, Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. And some of you may have heard of Khobar Towers. So I was responsible for setting up a battalion of soldiers. I think it's usually about 800 people. I was responsible for being part of an advance party to set up the operation. That meant set it up from going to the towers, which were blown up, several years later, but going in, putting in the beds, putting in getting the vehicles, everything that you could think of, similar to going in and starting, actually setting up, maybe, let me give you an analogy, maybe a hotel, but and transportation added to that. So that was my first journey into actually being, it was like, real world journey, retrograding or moving over, I want to say about 40,000 pieces of equipment out of what they call the theater, which was Iraq, Saudi Arabia, because when we went in, the first war was so short, the Army just left everything in place. So it was my responsibility to move that equipment back to the United States. And to be honest, there was a serial number accountability issue. That meant, what that means is they actually had moved so quick for the war and moved so quickly out of the first war that they had lost accountability of all the equipment. So that is when resilience really had to, I started, really understanding, first the criticality of the role that I had in trying to regain accountability of equipment that no one knew where it was. Next, and that also allowed me to obtain 5 points, veterans preference points, and I used that to help start my career with U.S. Customs Service in 1993 in El Paso, Texas. As you all may be aware, after 9/11 and around 2003, U.S. Customs Service, Agriculture, and Immigration Services were merged under what we now call U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So I started with the Legacy Agency of the U.S. Customs Service in 1993 on the land border. I worked there, and again, I think I was one of maybe probably 10 women out of just, I want to say maybe 1,400 men that actually were operational. There were other women that worked in administrative roles, but from the operational perspective, wearing a uniform with a weapon, there were only, I want to say about 10 of us at the time in 1993. There were people that had paved the way, other women that had paved the way for us, and my class was one of the largest classes of females when we graduated in August of 1993. The next journey was I moved, and I'll talk a little bit about how you maintain your resiliency, and it's really positivity, and it's really just never giving up, just continuing to move on despite what you're going through. In Daharan, sometimes it would be 140 degrees. It was stressful because it was 24 hours. In El Paso, in the 90s, it was almost like the Wild Wild West. There were people who would run the port with their vehicles. There were shootouts. There were bodies in trunks. I mean, if you don't have the ability to maintain your resilience or stay positive and stay focused and be agile, you could literally basically just crash and burn. So resiliency is important. Part of my role was that I volunteer for everything, and that's something that I would say to each of you that who want to aspire to move up into the executive ranks. Don't be afraid to volunteer, even though there may be some people who's like, oh, I would never do that. You never know who is looking at you, who may be watching to see the next leader of an organization is. And you have people that are always watching you. So if they see someone who is innovative, someone who may have messed up, but when they were someone came and talked to them, their attitudes remain positive. You kind of have to ensure that you don't take things personal when someone is trying to give you guidance, or if someone is trying to correct an error that has occurred. So that's also part of being resilient. The next major leadership journey was when I served as an officer in charge of pre-clearance operation in Nassau, Bahamas. Best job, well, one of the best jobs ever, because of course you're on an island. But I served in Nassau, Bahamas for 6 years, responsible for processing 1.6 million passengers. Really nice budget, about almost $1.5 million, housing. I was there on a diplomatic passport. So if you work pre-clearance, if you work for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, we have positions all over the world, because part of the goal is to push the borders out, to ensure that you're working with foreign countries, to ensure that you can, if there's anything that is going to go wrong, that it happens on foreign soil before, versus on our own soil. So we have pre-clearance locations all over the world. So I was fortunate enough to work in Nassau, Bahamas for 6 years. After I returned from the Bahamas, something interesting occurred. So again, resiliency, keep that in mind. So when I was leaving the Bahamas, I had had my first child. I mean, my only child. He was like my first child. My only child. You can normally put in for locations that you want to work, ideal locations. And so I had put in for several and actually got selected for a position in Delaware. I was thrilled, and some of you may go, Delaware. And I was like, well, my husband's from Delaware. So my goal, now listen to what I'm saying. My goal was to go to Delaware, buy a home close to the water, and sit there and retire as a, GS-13 and just enjoy the rest of my life in Delaware. However, I remember the gentleman called me. He said, okay, are you sure you want the position? I said, yes. And I explained to him just what I'm explaining to you all. And he said, okay, I'm going to put it in the mail. I'm going to notify headquarters. And I said, fine. Well, about 30 days later, that position was announced on Office of Personnel Management.gov. And I can tell you again, resilience. So I cannot tell you I was not disappointed. And I cannot tell you my feelings was not hurt. I cannot tell you I was not devastated, because I was. I thought I had the position. I thought that everything was locked. I did know most field offices around the country, like even here in LA and Long Beach, we all have like what we call a field office, a director of field operations. So I'm responsible for LAX. Don Custer is now responsible for the Seaport, and then Carlos Martel is responsible. He's overarching responsible for both of us, the operations that fall under him. So I knew the director of field operations, and so I called him, and he gave me, I was like, what happened? I thought I had the job. And he was like, oh, we wanted to just open up to see if we get any other applicants. Resilience. So what I've always done is try not to take it personal. I do know people who would have, been very upset and, still be holding a grudge to this day. But I had to remember something that's very critical. Things happen for a reason. I do believe that. And I had met Mike Lovejoy, is the gentleman I was talking about. I had met him when I volunteered for an assignment in Laredo, Texas, when I was assigned to El Paso. It was an assignment they could not get anyone to volunteer for. It was, Laredo, was, everybody was like 4-month detail. You're going to hate it. They couldn't get any volunteers, but I volunteered to go. And it was Southwest Border Interdiction Training. So I knew Mike. And so I was comfortable calling him, but I knew that part of the reason that I had made it out of El Paso, because it was really hard to get off the southern border back in the 90s, was because of him. So my next move was not to Wilmington, Delaware to retire. It was back to Washington, D.C., which I had worked in Washington, D.C. prior to the officer in charge position in the Bahamas. I had actually worked for Mike Lovejoy in DC. And then I became the director of what they called the non-intrusive inspection division. And that it was just a division responsible for the acquisition of X-ray technology. About $4.6 billion portfolio, responsible for deploying equipment to 328 ports of entry. And it was interesting. Probably I was in DC for 8 years, probably maybe halfway through that assignment. One of my friends who worked in the front office commented, we went to lunch that day, and she said, oh, she said, you really have flourished. Because I came back as a 13 and I ended up receiving a GS-15. And both the 14 position I wouldn't have applied for. I was actually told to put in for the position. The 15 position I did not apply for either. I was told to put in for the position. And so during the course of lunch, she said, oh yeah, I remember when you were in the Bahamas. And we started talking because I remember her calling me, and we were friends. We were actually roommates in FLETC together. And I remember her calling me and asking me to start putting in for positions, and she did it twice. But she never went into detail while she was telling me. I thought she was just telling me, well, because you can only do 6 years, and I hadn't been putting in. She said, no, I was telling you that because I was told that they wanted you back in Washington, D.C. because they wanted to groom you more. So I could have blocked what I would call a blessing if I would have been discouraged, if I wouldn't have been resilient when I was told what I thought was my dream job was not going to be my job. So again, you have to be able, I'm not going to say you're not going to be upset or hurt or want to, and I say this all the time, get on the floor and boohoo like a baby, because you are. And I'm not going to tell you you're not. But what I want to tell you is do it in private. Don't take it personal, and keep doing your best wherever you are. So let's discuss. So that's the journey. That's how I ended up. Once I became the director, I applied for being a senior executive service member. And how resilient am I? Let me just tell you. First time, I didn't do good on the interview. I rambled a lot. I didn't have solid examples. I had no clue how to format even a statement to respond to a panel interview. And so I guess I just was unprepared. I really didn't have a mentor that I could actually go to help me with coming up with examples for the position. And part of what I'll talk about in a few minutes is resiliency is part of one of the leading change competencies that all senior executive service members have to have experience in. There's 5 executive core qualifications: leading change, leading people, building coalitions, results driven, and okay, of course I can't think of the fifth one. Leading change, leading people, results driven, business acumen, which is critical, and building coalitions. So under leading change, which is the first executive core qualifications, one of the competencies is resilience. And resilience is from the ECQs, says deals effectively with pressure, remains optimistic and persistent even under adversity, recovers quickly from setbacks. And so it's strategic thinking, formulates objectives and priorities, and implements plans consistent with the long-term interests of the organization in a global environment. Capitalizes on opportunities and manages risk. Now, I had that skill set, and really before the interviews never realized how critical that resiliency skill set was. I never give up. I never give up. As a matter of fact, it's almost like it's a challenge for me if I fall down. I always, and I think that's because my parents always raised me to, you will fall, but the key is not to stay down. You will have setbacks. And if you read any leadership books, or if you look at any individuals that have successes, or Einstein, you may only see the successes, but believe me, they had plenty of failures. And so I always say sometimes you have to crawl before you walk, and walk before you run. And so that's the key. So let me talk about some fun facts, so you can understand what's going on now with the pandemic. So last year, the LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, processed 12 million passengers annually. Vegas, about 1.1 million passengers. The average flights per day last year were 163. Today, we're processing 10 flights per day. That's a 93.86% decrease. Last year, average daily was about 34,000 passengers. To last night, my team processed 977 passengers. So we've been processing less than 1,000 passengers, in some cases 100 passengers, and we've got about an average of a 97.2% decrease. I have about little over 1,000 employees. I manage 4 terminals just here in the LAX area: Tom Bradley International, Terminal 2, Terminal 4, and Terminal 7. All international terminals. We are now down to just the Tom Bradley terminal. The other 3 terminals have been just shut down. Of course, it makes sense. In addition to that, Las Vegas, it's been shut down. All the other user fee terminals were also shut down. I have one that just came back online. That was Ontario, and that was to facilitate the PPE, personal protective equipment, that is being imported into the United States. And they have been working with Amazon to do that. So we have that operation going on. I'm also responsible for air cargo operations. We had a slight decrease, about a 1.25% decrease in air cargo. but we're now back probably where we were before. So the air cargo is coming in. We get a lot of again, we're trying to determine between the fake PPE, the real test equipment, the fake test equipment. So we're getting a lot of that also. So, so you say, well, you got 1,060 people. What's going on? You know, how are you resilient? How are they resilient? What are you doing with your staff? Um, well, we have had people, you know, we had about 17 people that tested positive for COVID-19. What we've tried to do, we've stood up like emergency operations center, and because of the commercial air environment being so low, we've moved to give staff 1 week on, 1 week off. We've had to put some measures in place that we had PPE, you know, the N95 mask, and we had gloves, and I even got the face shields, and the union agreement was that as a manager, I couldn't force my employees to wear that PPE. And so that was very frustrating to me. I've been working very closely with the union president, insisting that we partner to address that situation, because to be honest, you know, even with the passenger count being so low, my concern was still for my employees, and I wanted them to be resilient, and I wanted them to, you know, to be healthy and safe. And so finally, the beginning of this week, which is to me a little late, um, PPE is now mandatory, but it should have been mandatory a long time ago. I do not think we would have had as many of the positive test employees if we would have just told the union, hey, we have this equipment for you. You must wear it. Bottom line. So again, you know, this has been an interesting time, and you talk resiliency because you are going before your employees and you're asking them to protect the American people, because we're working alongside of CDC and CWMD, but in the protection to ensure the American people are safe, you have to still ensure, and you want to ensure your own employees are safe and resilient. And one of the things that, you know, when you talk resiliency, um, you know, the definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And frankly, this has been very difficult and very, very tough. It really has. When I go and talk to my staff, I'm always positive. I mean, I have to honestly say, when I come in every morning, I say good morning. If you ask me how I'm doing, I'll say fabulous. You know, is it always fabulous? No, it's not. No, it's not. And a lot of times, you know, every now and then, you know, every now and then they'll go, really? But as a leader, you have to still, you know, you want to have a work-life balance for yourself. You want to have a work-life balance for your employees if you can, but you have to be agile. You have to be adaptive, and you have to be able to adjust to difficult situations, especially in these type of environments. Because today it could be one thing. You know, last year it was a migrant crisis. It was Ebola, you know, a couple of years before that. You know, it was the H1N1, and it was the SARS. It has been one thing after the other. And as a leader, if you don't have the resiliency, if you don't display that confidence, how do you expect your employees to do so and your other managers to do so? How do you get up and say to an employee who is processing a passenger to continue to do your work as safe as possible, knowing that they could possibly also be in some type of hazardous duty? So that's a little bit of my story. I talked about the ECQs and the fact that resiliency falls under leading change. Um, and leading change is a core qualification involving the ability to bring about strategic change within and outside an organization to meet organizational goals, establishing an organization vision, and to implement it in a continuously changing environment. And so if we're talking resilience today, and you're basically leading change, and that is what leadership is about. So with that being said, I think I'll stop. I know I did receive a few questions, and I don't know how you all want me. I can go through some of the questions I received, or how would you all prefer that we do this?
Yeah, we can open it up. Does anybody have a question they want to ask? You can just either write it in the chat box, or you should be able to just unmute your mic and ask a question.
And I don't see anybody. I see
you see me.
names.
Yeah.
But I don't see anybody else.
So I think if you want to, does anyone have a question you want to ask? You can, I think everyone would need to show their video if you want to show up too, or you can just unmute yourself. So I love how, your journey is just so full of so much amazing stuff. But when you were in Oklahoma, you went to, you became an officer, right? Or you went into the military. Did you, when you were a little girl, did you know you were a leader and that you wanted to go and be an officer or in the military?
When I was a little girl, I sort of knew, I thought I wanted to be a policeman. Then I thought I wanted to be an attorney. But I honestly, I graduated at 16. So I was very young. And I was kind of a nerd. I was a nerd, kind of skinny and, So I volunteered to go to summer school every summer in high school. So yeah, I was a really big nerd. So I was like, so I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I know once I went to college, I just needed to do, I said, I have to do something actually just to get away from Oklahoma. I was stuck. What I didn't tell you all is I worked before that with the Department of Defense for 10 years. I started as a GS2 key punch operator. So, and then once with a degree and stagnant for 10 years, I was like, I will not be able to make a living if I remain in Oklahoma. And so I just knew, I knew that I didn't have the skill set. I said a college degree, once you get the degree, you really expect the heavens and the moon and the stars to open up and a job to just land in your lap. And you go, yay, I can live comfortably. But it didn't occur. So I had to come up, again, being resilient, I had to come up with a B and a C and a D plan. And part of that was, hey, maybe if I join the military, I said military at first, and my mother was like, please no. And I said, well, I have to get some leadership experience. I said, because the degree is not helping me. And so I joined the reserves, and I just said, it was just a thought. I just thought that I know the military will train you and then you'll get the experience. And then hopefully that will give me the experience to do something else. And really that's how it was. I never, it wasn't something I had thought about when I was younger. It's just, I need to do something so I can become a leader, because I didn't want to remain in the administrative type field that I was in when I was hired into.
Wow. And the rest is history. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Jill, did you have a question, Jill?
No question. I just want to say that I really liked your story. So I was in Alcoa working for 5 years in engineering. So I appreciate the 140 days. And I was there right after the towers blew up. So it was interesting times.
Yeah. Thank you for your service. Yes, that's an interesting situation. The towers, so I was there for about 6 months. The towers blew up, but something else happened. So I also took at the time, to get into this type of position, you had to take a test called I think it was the American Careers Test. It's like ASVAB, but you would have to go to a building, federal building normally, and test for these positions. And then they took the highest scores. That's why the 5-point veteran preference points really helped me, because I would always score like 95 anyway. But if you don't have military experience, then that 5 points got me, like, I think I scored like 96. That 5-point got me like to 101. But where I took the test was the Murrah building in Oklahoma City that was also blown up. So for some reason, I think about that. I've been very closely connected to 2 facilities or buildings that have blown up.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's resiliency that you've stuck with it and kept leading throughout this.
Definitely. I refuse to give up.
Yeah. So a question came in. If you're comfortable sharing, what age did you join the reserves? I've considered the same, but thought it was too late.
Oh, wow. Let me see. I try to forget my age. But I joined the reserves in, I want to say 1981. It's very strenuous. It's very, very strenuous. Was it 1981? I think it was 1981. And it's very physical. It's mental. I do remember calling my dad, crying and boo-hooing, telling him to come get me because it was just, but it was a great, when you look back over it, it was a great experience, but it was very difficult. And I haven't ever been really, really physical. But my husband, at the time I was dating, he was a wrestler, and so he would make me run. He developed a couple of workout routines for me to kind of get me in shape. And even when I went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, that was physical and mental also. And so you can do anything you determine to do, if you're determined to do it. But you do have to get your head right. And sometimes it helps to have your dad tell you what my dad told me is, oh, fine. It seems like this is really what you needed. I was like, what? I'm going to call your mom. I'm calling grandma on you. So needless to say, he didn't come pick me up.
I love the story how you thought you were getting passed up for a job, but really you were being groomed for something bigger. So how did that like dawn on you, or how did what was that like?
It was an aha moment because it was so interesting because I'll go back a little backwards. So when I finally, it took me 3 interviews before I got my final SES. So I had 1 interview, terrible, 2nd interview, terrible. Finally, the 3rd interview, I did well. Again, resilience. It's almost like if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going like, no, I can do it. But when I was offered Buffalo, New York, and I was offered Long Beach Seaport. Of course, I'm coming to Long Beach. And I remember asking my executive assistant commissioner, who's over all of OFO, Office of Field Operations. And I said, well, do you have any advice? Do you have any guidance, sir? What would you like me to do? And he said, LaFonda, I want you to be on the lookout for the next generation of leaders. He stated, he made a comment that, you're a good judge of people, and everything started kind of dawning on me. And that's why I say you never know who's looking at you, who's observing you, who's sitting back, just taking in what people around you are saying about you, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. And so when he commented about that I was a good judge of character, that kind of, I started thinking about what my girlfriend Sandra had said over lunch, because it's almost like they knew me better than I knew myself. It was really it was an aha moment, but it was interesting that I had been watched all that time, because 2008 is when I came back, and I got here in 2016. I was there for 8 years. That's how much grooming I needed, apparently. But it was interesting because they had already said, she told me, and I asked her, I said, why didn't you ever tell me? And she was like, oh, I don't know. She said, I just thought you might have. I said, no. I said, really, I said, I could have really, been, she said, I knew your personality type, that you weren't going to take it personal. And I remember when I went to Mike Lovejoy, the gentleman who told me, oh, we wanted to open it up. I went to his retirement. He retired in Baltimore, Maryland, which is not far from DC. You guys know that. And so I drove up to his retirement. And I think he was really kind of shocked because I really, I hugged him. I thanked him. And I thanked him. And I said, the first time I was in DC, I really didn't understand the bureaucracy. And Drew can tell you this. It's so much bureaucracy I didn't understand. The second time, after 8 years, I realized that what I was calling bureaucracy, yeah, it's bureaucracy, but it's a method in the madness of it, because you're creating and developing policy on a national level that can impact the globe, not just your operation, that your little piece of the world. That's the other thing that I learned about. Don't be so myopic in your thought process. Even though we want to say it's all about us, it's not always about you. It's not always about your little organization. Remember, you're part of a bigger organization. And so that's why the mission and the goals of your organization that you work for has to be messaged and conveyed to your employees. And sometimes you may want to say, oh, it's, you know, I'm in LAX, and I'm not going to help Long Beach, or I'm in Vegas and I'm not going to help San Diego. Or, you know, again, I was in Long Beach right before the holidays, and I was called and asked, would I consider going to Buffalo for 3 months? And when you get a call from your boss in Washington, D.C., who asks you if you would mind going to going to Buffalo, New York for November, December, and January. You know, so I said, well, you know, let me think about it. I'll give you a call and call you tomorrow and let you know. I said I need to talk to my husband because I have a 13-year-old at home. And went talked to my husband, and you know, we had talked about this being a senior executive service. You can member, you can be redirected anywhere, and a lot of times their expectations, your package goes before Office of Personnel Management. When you get an SES, you should be able to be dropped into any environment and succeed. And that's why those 5 executive core qualifications are so important. And so I called them the next day and said yes. So while I was in Buffalo during the coldest time of the year, everything started going on, including this situation that we're in now. And also while I was there, I got another call from the boss again and asked about me going and instead of going back to Long Beach, coming to LAX. Resilience. You know, because you rock with it and you roll with it. And I said, yes, sir. I'll go wherever you need me.
Wow. I love how this core set of competencies is something like you've memorized, you rely on it. It's something so we have something similar at Leadership Long Beach. We call them principles. But I love how you're using it as a roadmap and a tool. And is it something you like think about almost on a daily basis? Like it guides you?
Great question. It's something that I think we all use. I'm sure your principles are the same way. It's not, you know, I don't, you know, well, maybe I do harp on them a lot. And the reason I do is because during my interactions with my employees, I talk about the ECQs, Executive Core Qualifications, all the time. And I always tell my employees, and I have a staff meeting, you know, once a week on Tuesdays. I have them put together what I call issue papers. I have them put together accomplishment records, like when things, like if they get seizures or anything that goes on, I have them write it up in a format called CCAR, which is context. So what is the context? So responsible for the largest, second largest airport in the United States, facilitating trade and travel. What's the challenge? Managing during a pandemic. What actions did you take? Established an emergency operations center, worked closely with the union for PPE, so, employees wearing PPE, ensured, we could give more weather and safety leave. What were the results? Fewer positive tests for employees, increased morale. So CCAR, context, challenge, action, results. And the results usually should be quantitative and qualitative. And the reason that I always go through the 5 ECQs is, again, based on the guidance I received 4 years ago about looking for the next generation of leaders. So I want my staff to have what I didn't have. I want them to understand that there are 5 ECQs.
Mm.
If you're a GS-15 now, you go to what we call a CBP Leadership Institute that used to be taught by the University of Maryland. And then we go to subsequent courses every other year. In the CBPLI course, they talk about the ECQs. Unfortunately, I was one of those individuals that had not went through that course. I was just chugging along, working. I had applied for it, wasn't selected, and never tried again. And I remember Rich DiNucci, who's the port director in San Francisco, he came in and he said, "Oh, I want you to go to the course." And he said, "Why aren't you an SES?" And I said, "Well, I can't get beyond the interview." And he said, "Well, I don't understand why you can't, because you're meeting with our SESers. Your program has you briefing Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee. You're on the Hill every quarter. You're doing," he went on and on and on. And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Mm. And when I went to CBPLI, he came out to do a Fireside chat. Hmm. So, and we have at the academy in West Virginia, we have a big, huge chow hall or restaurant, but it has a huge fireplace. So they do bring in SES executives to speak. And he had came out before he left that night. He introduced me to a lady by the name of Cheryl James, who was a director of field operations in Seattle. And he said, "I need you to mentor her, because she's going to get an interview again, and I want her to be ready." Hmm. And Ms. James, who's in DC now, we talked briefly. When she got back to Seattle and I got back to DC, she called and she scheduled, for a telecom. She had looked at my resume. She asked them, "What are the questions?" And then she said, "Well, how are you answering them?" And then she just did a couple of things. She made one comment. She says, "First of all, you need to raise it higher. You need to come up higher. You're talking too much in the weeds." Because my program was very technical. Even though I'm not a technical person, I was managing rocket scientists. And she says, "Raise it up, bring it up higher. What does your program do for CBP? How does it follow CBP, DHS, White House strategy? What's the impact of your program on the global supply chain?" And high level when you talk. Stop getting in the weeds. No one, And then she told me about CCAR. And then she said, you seem like you have your ECQs down. Hmm. So, she said, "You just now need to get 5 good examples." Wow. And you need to practice. And she said, "Remember, they put their pants on the same way you do. Speak plain. Don't try to, because I said to her, I said, "Well, I don't communicate, the way I would like to communicate." She said, "Be yourself." Wow. Yeah. Just be yourself. She said, and just, practice. And so what I did is my husband and then I think Sequoia was 10, a couple of Saturdays in a row, they work with me. And I'm talking about work with me, because my daughter was like, oh, she got up one time from the table, went and laid on the sofa, started kicking her legs. And she was like, "Oh, Mommy, you're just too boring." And my husband just said, "You really have to own this." He said, "The stuff that you're doing, stop trying to read, own what you're doing." And so it was almost like a family affair. And so I guess I do sort of live and breathe these ECQs.
I love it.
I do.
It's so inspiring. And it does make me think about how we could use our principles even more. So thank you for just being a living example of that, and a leader who has this moral compass and this guidebook. And I love the name Sequoia. That is so cute. And I love that you're such a strong example for her. She's a very lucky little girl to have you as a mother. And I'm sorry for what you're going through at LAX, but I'm so grateful that you're there leading, and that you're willing to take an hour of your time to share with us your resiliency, reminding us that we can never give up. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Sarah says, thank you so much. Shanetta says, wonderful story of leadership and resilience. And I know we're just very blessed to have you in leadership in our city. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure. And anytime you all need me, Drew knows that I'm there to support you all, because you always were supporting me when I was at the Seaport.
Awesome. Thank you,
Take
LaFonda.
care.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.